Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. This is Jason Horak reporting on the ongoing adventures of the Dodge Daytona electric vehicle. The project that we are working on today is my EVNetics Soliton1 motor controller. Now you may be wondering, why is it sitting here on my kitchen counter? Why is it not in the car? Well, it's actually working just fine. There are no problems with it. However, it was really dirty and covered in grime and grease and road dirt and salt and slush and all that kind of stuff. And it had been in the car for about 12 years. I wanted to take it out, get it all cleaned up, replace these screws with non-rusty ones, and all that fun stuff. I also wanted to remove the bracket. There's like a mounting bracket where it's put in the car, and get that all cleaned up and make sure that that looks, as spiffy as possible for anyone who happens to stick their head underneath my car and look up at the Soliton, which is kind of in the nose of the vehicle. So there's an interesting story about this particular EVNetics Soliton1. And this is actually my second EVNetics Soliton1, because the first one, which I purchased in 2010 and used in my first electric vehicle, was in the car, mounted in the same position as this one was. And when I shipped it out to the first electric vehicle converters convention in 2011, out in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, there was an issue. Perhaps during shipping it got banged around a little bit too much. I'm not really sure. But something inside the controller actually had broken loose. And from where it was glued or whatever they do in there. And it shorted something out and it was dead. So when my vehicle arrived from the shipper in Cape Girardeau, it didn't run. It was right at the convention, day one, didn't work. It was very, very sad. So when I got off the plane, I heard the unfortunate news, and my friend Mike Gates was actually at the convention ahead of me. He had driven to the location, and he told me that it wasn't working and that it was in the shop, up on the lift, and people were taking a look at it. So that was kind of interesting. So my first experience when I went to EVCON and came into the shop at EVTV was of the guys working on my car, which was awesome. I mean, just, that everybody chipped in and helped out. It was great. So what eventually happened was that the guys from EVNetics themselves were there at the show. Again, this was the first ever convention, at least that I know of this kind, and it was really cool. So EVNetics was there, and a gentleman named Sebastian, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name because I'm going to butcher it horribly, but who's from, I believe, Rebirth Auto and EVNetics, down in Florida, ? Anyway, he was there working on my car, and he actually replaced the controller himself. So he put this controller in my car by hand, the guy that built it, or, the president of the company, or whoever he was in relation to EVNetics. Anyway, I have a picture here on my blog. This is from 2011, EVCON, day one, and that's his name there. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but anyway, you can see he's actually got his hands up in my car working on it, installing this particular motor controller, with other attendees checking out. And it was great. It was just it was a cool experience. That's like what I walked into after I got off the plane and got to EVTV for the first time. But anyway, that was cool. And I just wanted to kind of share that a little bit. So this controller has just been, in my car for all that time, and it's been working great. I've drag raced with it. I ran autocross. I put many, many, many miles on my car. I've blown up a host of motors. It caused all kinds of trouble. DC to DC converters have smoked, but this thing has been a trooper. It just has been working great. I initially purchased the Soliton 1 because I really liked basically the software that comes with it. You can hook it up with an Ethernet cable to a laptop. You can get all the data from it, and that really appealed to me. There were other competing controllers at the time, like the Curtis that was very popular, probably still is. There was the Zilla that was kind of either in development or had been out there. But just the simplicity of the wiring, how everything hooks up right here and has an Ethernet port. It's, positive and negative for the batteries, positive and negative for the motor. And that's it. That's the whole wiring. It's like really simple, and yet it's super strong. It's all billet aluminum. Just a really nice controller. Great product. Unfortunately, EVNetics is now out of business, and or at least they're no longer selling these to end users as of 2023. I can't remember exactly when that change happened, but it was a sad day. So unfortunately, there's no support on these controllers. Like, there's no official, I can't just send it back to them to have them repair it, because if they still are in business, they don't deal with, end user customers like me anymore. Knowing the people involved, it's possible that I could contact Sebastian or Jeffrey. And even if they don't work there anymore, they'd probably still at least guide me in the right direction. Good folks. But regardless, it's a little bit of a, how would I describe it? It's something that's kind of in the back of my mind as, if this thing dies, some part breaks loose inside, one of the electronics inside this unit that's, now 12 years old, should fail, I don't have a replacement. I don't have a way to make my car go anymore. It's the brains of the operation. It's what makes the pedal input and the battery power input translate into the power to the motor. So it's very important. So anyway, I want to take it out, clean it up, make sure it's in as best shape as I can. My plan is to go to the Electric Vehicle Converters Convention in 2023 here, and I want to have it, looking as spiffy as possible. Even if it should die, at least it'll look nice, right? So anyway, I pulled it out of the car, and I have it here on my kitchen counter to essentially make this video. And after I cleaned it up, but the main purpose of this video is that I was thinking about that, and I did a Google searches, and I was trying to find, is there anybody out there repairing these things? Is there anybody who knows enough to, be dangerous and might fix it, or attempt to fix it for me if it should break? And ironically, I stumbled on a couple things. For one, I did find someone who repairs them, but also I found an eBay listing. And this is kind of interesting. So here I am looking around, and I'm like, oh, look, eBay. I'm sure the camera isn't making this out terribly great, but I will try to include a better picture on my blog. Anyway, $1,500 for an EVNetics Soliton 1. Looks to be in mint condition. It's got, it looks better than mine as far as like how much wear and stuff is on it. I've lost a little paint here and there from rocks and things flinging up and hitting it. Most of my lettering on the front has kind of been, actually it was there pretty good until I took it out of the car and cleaned it. And just the cleaning agent itself seems to have taken off my decals of all my lettering, which is unfortunate, but I may try to do some kind of labels or something to fix that. Anyway, I looked at this one, and again, I'm sure the camera isn't making out the picture very well, but it looks great. It's got all the lettering, all the contacts look super clean. So from a just purely artistic piece of metal, I was like, you know what, $1,500, that's pretty fair. These were $3,200 when I bought mine, again, many years ago. And according to the listing, again, camera probably won't make it out, but it shows the original price of $3,200. The gentleman selling it had reduced it to, I believe that's $2,200, and it didn't sell. Then he dropped it down again to $1,500 or best offer. And I was like, wow, you know, I just, here's potentially a working unit. I don't know the history of this, right? It's eBay, who knows? And the seller didn't really put much description in here as far as, you know, where this came from, what was going on, why was it pulled out of a car, you know, why is it being sold, that kind of thing. So I figured, hey, I got nothing to lose. I sent a message through eBay to this individual who's selling this, and I just asked him, hey, you know, what's the history? Is this unit, you know, is this, what's the story? And he got back to me very promptly, and he let me know that this was used in a build for like students, like a student class kind of thing, teaching electric vehicle conversions, and they had, you know, built a car with it, so it had very light use. It was, you know, under a supervised setting, students, that kind of thing. Didn't really spend much time on the road, if at all, because, again, student builds, sometimes they don't even register these things. So it probably got driven around like the parking lot and that kind of thing, and was like a showpiece to test things out. But anyway, light use. So that's what it says here as far as the, you know, the amount of use it got. But he confirmed that, and I was like, hey, you know what? That's perfect. That's like literally the best answer you could give somebody on eBay is, hey, this part barely got used at all. Some students had it in a, you know, conversion project. They learned it was an educational tool, and then we pulled it out of the car when the car got disassembled. Great. You know, they probably used lead acid batteries or something, who knows. And so it didn't last, and they ended up removing the batteries in the car. So anyway, at that point, I immediately bought it. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to find another one of these out there in this condition for that kind of price. And even though I can't, you know, get it serviced, EVNetics isn't out there to help me with this anymore. Having another one is a, you know, it's a spare, it's a backup, right? Assuming it works. That's always the gamble on eBay. You know, he said it worked when he took it out of the car. You know, does it still work after sitting on the shelf for a bunch of years and then being shipped? Who knows? We're going to find out, right? So anyway, the thing that pushed me over the edge and made me just pull the trigger and buy this was that I also had been doing some research online and looking for places to repair, and I found a gentleman on YouTube who was doing repairs on Soliton 1s and Soliton Juniors and a whole bunch of other controllers, and he clearly knows what he's doing, electrical engineer or something, because he can identify the individual chips on the boards, he can solder them and replace them, each component inside these things. He can find a equivalent to whatever was used at the time, because a lot of times the parts aren't available anymore that are a one-to-one match. But if you know what you're doing, you can look at the part that was there before and find what's the modern equivalent is that'll be compatible and make it go, and he does. I will have a link to his YouTube channel in the description here, and I think it's like Wolftronics is the guy's name. His YouTube name is Wolftronics, and I don't really know how to get in contact with that individual, but I'm going to find out, because I want to have someone I can call, someone I can ship one of these to have it repaired. You know, if it costs less than $1,500 to have it repaired, it's worth it to me. You know, this is, again, the heart, soul, the brain of my car. So anyway, but mine's working fine, so I don't really need to get it repaired at the moment. But having a backup unit, if it works, would mean that I don't have to have my car be not functional while I'm sending one out for shipment and they're tracking down parts and, you know, doing the repair and stuff. I could still be driving my car. So that's hugely appealing to me. Also, I have a bunch of motors. I'm sure you've seen my videos of my various Netgain Warp 9 motors that have fallen out of balance and, you know, had various issues, but I need to send those out for refurbishment, which still hasn't happened. I've been talking about it for years and it hasn't happened, but soon, TM. Hopefully it'll happen. But the point is that I have a spare motor. I have other spare parts for my car, you know, spare transmissions, that kind of thing. Having a spare main motor controller is hugely important. So the other advantage to having a second EVNetics controller would be that because I have those extra motors, after I get them refurbished, I could potentially put them in a second electric vehicle. You know, maybe I'll convert one of my other Dodge Daytonas and make that into a experimental type setup for new battery chemistries or something. I can do that if I have a second controller. So anyway, for a lot of reasons, it made sense for me to buy this. And, you know, even if the thing showed up and was dead, well, I potentially have a way to get that repaired. And, you know, you can't get a nice billet aluminum piece like this anywhere else. So there are a number of them out there, but they're not for sale. Okay, with all that preamble and history lesson and general Jason rambling out of the way, what are we doing here today? Why is the Soliton in my kitchen? Well, I wanted to go ahead and test it just to kind of go through the motions and show what all the settings are, hook it up to the laptop, and all that good stuff. So the way we've got this configured is we just got the positive and negative hooked up to the ignition and ground leads. Very simple. And then this cable goes over here and is hooked to a standard automotive DC connector like you'd put in a cigarette lighter. And I'm going to plug that into my battery backup unit, car starter type thing, which is a 12-volt battery, and it outputs, I think, 13.5 volts, which is interesting. I didn't realize that it wasn't just a 12-volt, but hey, that's cool. And so we also have the Ethernet cable plugged in to the laptop down here, and, you know, just a standard straight-through Ethernet cable, nothing fancy. And so what we're going to do is power on the Soliton. Let's plug this in. So as you can hear, the fans started up, and that always happens whenever the Soliton detects some kind of error, and it kicks the fans on full bore to make sure that it still gets cooled even if the car isn't moving or there's no other airflow across the device. It doesn't want to get heated up for reasons unknown due to some error. In this particular case, the error is we don't have a battery pack attached. And we don't have a load attached to with the motor. So it's going to have an error message, something to the effect of pack voltage too low, that kind of thing. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and open up the laptop. And hopefully I don't bump the cable too hard. My connector's a little bit sketchy sometimes. But okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up Firefox here. And I've got a bookmark set up to go to the controller. Just for reference, it is at http://169.254.0.1. Now that address is reachable when you plug in a straight Ethernet cable to a device, and it doesn't get an actual Ethernet address in Windows. It just kind of defaults to a 169 address, and you're able to ping that particular thing. Actually, I will show you that. So if we ping 169.254.0.1, we are getting a response back that it sees something out there, which in this case is the Soliton. So, if we go ahead and go to our little happy bookmark, there is the web interface that the Soliton is giving us. Of note, we have a big ol' error list. And so it's telling us pre-charge, timeout, no voltage. So it's not reading any voltage from the battery pack. Not surprising, it's not physically connected to anything. So that's why it's throwing an error. So we're going to clear the error state and then go back. And now we're just at like the regular settings page and so forth. Again, the controller is still in a non-ready state because it doesn't have any pack voltage and it won't turn on unless you cycle power, unplug it, plug it back in, but with a pack attached. But we can see that I'm running firmware version 1.52 from May 21st, 2012, and it has my serial number of 8107483, and that actually matches. There's a little logo right here, or sorry, engraving that has the number, the serial number for the Soliton as well. And when I watched that video from the Wolftronics guy, he said that this is the month and then this is the year that it was made. So it was made in August of 2010 when this particular unit was built, with the actual like serial number kind of being the last 4 digits of the 7483. But anyway, so it's showing that it thinks that my throttle range is set to 49 to 85%. And that's just something that I had dialed in with the configuration at one point. You know, how much CPU and RAM it's using, that kind of thing. But yeah, so it's of interest. I'm going to be taking some screenshots of all of these settings right from this website, just so that we know exactly what the settings were on this particular unit, so that when I get my new one, I can compare and contrast and make sure that everything is set up the same. The important ones, or the ones that really affect the performance of your car, are things like this section down here. So minimum battery voltage at no current, which is set to 150. Full current is 120. Can't see, I'm blind, I'm getting old. Yeah, so this is the minimum battery voltage at full current is 120. So it's like when the batteries sag. And this is the maximum battery current of 750 amps out of the 1,000 that it can do. Maximum motor voltage is 170. That's like the net gain spec. The maximum motor current is also set to 750, so it'll do 170 times 750, which however much that is. And yeah, so and then the maximum motor power is a function of that's the kilowatts, that you kind of multiply the 170 by the 750 and you get a value. Let's do that here just because I can't do math in my head. So 170 times 750, so 127.5 kilowatts is what those limits will impose on the what's going to the motor. But then we set the maximum motor power to 150, which is above that by a comfortable margin, just in case it needs to bounce up and down and give it a little extra to get going, or I'm not exactly sure how that works, but anyway, that's how I have it set, and it seems to work pretty well for my application. And then the slew rate, kilometers per second, or sorry, gosh, I can't even read that. It's amps per second. So it's 700 amps per second. So it'll take 1 second to go from 0 to the 700 amp limit, and then a little bit more to get to our 750. But anyway, that's the settings that I have on this controller. Now I have my Soliton EV Logger program, which I hauled out of mothballs from way back in 2013. And it still works. Amazing. So this is just a little program that I made in Visual Basic that kind of shows, it queries the controller and it'll tell us, so right now it's showing the error 0 voltage after pre-charge is the error coming across. And this does the same function as EVNetics had released a little program, console program of some kind, that would connect to the controller and query it and get back the data stream of what's happening at that particular moment. So here we've got my supply voltage is at 12.91. That's what it's detecting from my little battery backup unit here. And you know, the temperature that the Soliton is at from the internal temperature probes, that kind of thing, 71.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which is nice and comfortable. It's about 70 degrees in here, so that's about perfect. And so, yeah, anyway, how much CPU it's using, all that fun stuff. Over on the right-hand side, I have a refresh button here, and it goes ahead and it checks that website that we were just looking at, and will tell us all of those settings that I just read off before. Might be a little easier to read on camera, I'm not sure. It's hard to see on a little screen here, but anyway, so all those values exactly the same as what we saw on the website, because it's literally pulling them, scrubbing the website and pulling them in here. You'll notice when I press refresh, it disconnects for a second, like that, which is the same amount of time as if you go on this website here and you hit refresh, how long it takes to like draw the page. And that's just a function of how fast the controller is, you know, the little web server that's inside the Soliton. Yeah, so anyway, so that's what it's doing. This is our live stream of data. If I had it hooked up to the pack, you could see as the pack sags and all that kind of thing, you'd get real-time updates here. You know, the RPM that's being fed in with the RPM sensor, all that fun stuff. And I did have a temperature sensor hooked up to one of the inputs at one point, just so that I could tell the motor temp roughly and stuff like that. But the other thing that you can do here is I have presets, so economy, performance, and extreme. So for example, if I press economy, it just reprogrammed the Soliton just like as if I had gone to the website. So it's now at 168, 150, 360 is the max pack amperage. The motor limits it to 360. So now we're like hamstringing the motor, making it relatively slow. You know, the max motor power is down to 64 kilowatts. And the whole point there is that technically you'd probably get more range if you ran with slower accelerations, and just by, you know, reducing these values. The fact that you can reprogram this on the fly is really cool, and one of the big things that I like about this controller. So the website here, it's still showing the old values, so the 750 amps, but if I hit reload and reload the page, you will see that it now is at the 360 that we've set. So again, the program just kind of works back and forth with the web page, and instead of going to the website and going and editing all these values, you just press the button and it reconfigures your controller to whatever you set up as your preset. And then we can also set it up to the extreme, and you'll see that the slew rate is actually a little different in this performance preset than we had before. I must have dialed that in at one point. Same thing with the motor power, it's at 128 instead. So there's some differences in how I had set up the preset that was on this program. But actually, so that's kind of interesting. I'll have to make note of that. But if we go to extreme, so this would be like theoretically drag racing mode. And that sets us to the max that the controller can do of 1,000 amps for both what it's pulling from the pack and what it's sending to the motor. And it has it set to 172 kilowatts for the voltage. Multiplying that by that, which would be 170 even, but 172 a little bit higher just because. So yeah, so that's, and then the slew rate is 2,000. So it would take a half a second, so 2,000 milliseconds to get from 0 to 1,000 amps. So half a millisecond to, or sorry, half a second rather, to get to the full pack amperage. So very quick burst of power. Likely would put a lot of strain on your clutch. Your clutch might slip. Your tires are definitely going to squeal, that kind of thing. But you know, that's kind of what you're looking for in drag race mode. But anyway, so all those configurations, you can just easily go back and forth. And under configuration tab here is actually how I set up all those things. So economy mode, we've got, you know, those settings and performance and extreme, and you can just change these to whatever you want as long as they're within the range that EVNetics supports. The program does like prevent you from from doing that. I'm just kind of curious. Yeah, copyright 2013. So yes, 7/1/2013. So, you know, almost exactly a little over 10 years last time I touched this program. So that's kind of fun. But anyway, so there it is. There's the controller. There's the configuration. Using my little program. There's the website. And yeah, works like a champ. So, why are we doing all this? Well, because I bought a new controller on eBay. So, let's see if I can do this without completely shaky camming the world. I've got kind of like this janky rig set up with my, there's a milk crate underneath my tripod for the camera. But, so yeah, so there's the new controller. And so this one, again, from eBay, from John, was the gentleman's name on eBay. Really nice guy, and seemed to be a like-minded soul. So I'm hoping this controller works as advertised, and we're going to test it. So the first test we're going to do is simply hooking it up like we did the old one. Okay then, and now with the magic of video editing, I have moved the camera and repositioned it. Move the laptop. So we have the laptop over here plugged into this new Soliton. I've rewired the positive and negative leads to our handy dandy cigarette lighter plug. And I'm going to plug this in on camera for the very first time. At least for me. If I let the smoke out, well, we're going to have a good light show. So let's go ahead and plug her on in. Oh, now that's interesting. Right off the bat, we notice that we get lights, little LED status lights that my old one didn't do anymore. Wasn't sure if that was happening because I didn't have the pack hooked up, or if that wasn't happening because it was damaged in some way. Probably shorted out the lights when I cleaned it or something, who knows. But yeah, that's always fun. Or maybe it died along the way and I just never noticed because it's underneath my car. But anyway, we've got happy blinky status lights. So we've got a flashing stat light and a red error light. Red error light isn't all that surprising since it, you know, again, isn't hooked up to any kind of pack current. But let's take a look at what the laptop has to say about this whole situation. Okay, let's go to the website. Boom! Look at that error list. Okay. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff. So right off the bat, it's interesting. So the serial number of this one, I'm hoping the camera's making it out, but I guess we'll find out, is 0111, so January 2011, so a little newer than mine. Serial number 7819. So it has the older firmware, the 1.4, which was July 14th, 2011. I had updated mine to the newer one at the time, and I still have that out on my computer someplace, so I can update this one to the same version of the firmware. But we've got a bunch of error, pre-charge timeouts, 12 volt too low, that was quite some time ago, 687 minutes, so I'm guessing that's not our current situation. That's kind of weird, but sure, whatever. But we're getting a lot of 12 volt supply to low settings, or readings, which is kind of interesting. What else we got? Okay. Power mode is performance, all that's kind of the same. Deadband. So this, I'm just kind of curious what they had it set to, because, you know, again, it's different than mine. It's so it looks like they had the minimum battery voltage at no current at 9, and the minimum battery voltage full current at 9. So that's like hooking up a 12 volt battery to test it kind of thing, perhaps. Also 700 amps. Max motor power of 180. So they're pushing their control or their motor a little harder than I push mine. And 800 amps. So they're only pulling 700 amps out of the battery, but they're trying to push 800 into the motor. That's interesting. So maybe they had a bigger pack, you know, like a higher voltage pack originally. I'm not sure. Anyway, kind of interesting. They got the slew rate set to 10,000. So that's super fast, zero to hero mode. But yeah, anyway, kind of interesting. So we're gonna go ahead and clear the errors just for funsies. Maybe. It's thinking about it. Huh, we lost the webpage. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not getting a blinky light on my laptop for the webpage. I wonder if it's got a similar kind of... This connection's really secure, but yeah, you can see the little like lights on the... Huh, okay. Well, let me go ahead and cycle power. Not super encouraging, but... So... Okay, now I've got activity lights on my Ethernet connection. I'll try reloading the page again. And value set. So I wonder if it took the... Okay, it did clear the errors. Huh, but I lost access to the website. That's kind of weird. Maybe that was kind of an issue with this older firmware. I'm not really sure. But regardless, it seems to be working again, so we'll call it win. Looks like they had output set to like a water pump, which makes sense because in the YouTube video, he had some pipes hooked up to these two ports, little like ends of pipes. So I wonder if, or I'm assuming that they actually used water cooling on this back in the day. It's nothing I've ever needed in my particular build. It sits right in the front of my car and gets maximum airflow when it's moving down the road, and it has never really been a problem. I've never had it overheat on me. But okay, so that's still connected. Let's go ahead and try my program just to see what this one does. And we're going to refresh. Doing its refreshy delay, and there we go. So again, you can see that the numbers here again, that it's 9, 9, 700, etc. So yeah, it's the same deal. It shows the July 14th, 2011 firmware version and stuff. So yeah, so again, having the pre-charge timeout error, same as on my other one, which makes perfect sense. So anyway, everything is looking pretty much good. I'm not going to touch my buttons up here for reconfiguring this because I want to leave it as is without doing any changes whatsoever until I at least get it in my car. You know, then I can configure some things. You know, stuff that I'm going to definitely need to change are, you know, like here, the throttle mid and max. You know, they had it set to 7 and 83%, so that was a much bigger range than I use in mine. Yeah, anyway, stuff like that. You know, I want to make sure that all these other settings are going to match 1-to-1 to what I've got on my old one. As far as like, you know, the throttle deadband and all this kind of fun stuff. Looks like they had, yeah, they did not have their motor idling, which is good. That's, mine also doesn't idle. There's no reason to have it running when the car is not moving, unless you've got like a pulley-driven system like power steering or air conditioning or that kind of thing that you need to keep the motor going at all times, there's no point in idling it like a gas engine does. Yeah. So anyway, this is kind of fun that, you know, it works. I got a web page. My program works with it right out of the box. That's cool because I've never tested my program with any other controllers other than my own, so that's always fun. So yeah, so that's what we got going on here, and so my next actual test for this is I'm going to install it in the car, and you know, make sure all the settings match the old one, and then drive it, and make sure it works in a real world scenario. I have not left feedback on the eBay page yet, but I did want to mention the gentleman who shipped it, John, did an amazing job of packaging this. You know, this is a heavy unit. We're going to unplug that so it's not making a racket with the fans while I'm talking, but he did just a terrific job with the box. He used this thick foam stuff that's almost like a exercise mat or something, and he put that on all 6 sides of the box, and then he wrapped this in bubble wrap, many layers of bubble wrap, and then also on the top he put extra layers of bubble wrap to make sure that the you know, all these sensitive things didn't get bashed in shipping. Anyway, great job on the shipping. Gives me a lot of confidence that the thing probably works just fine in a car because, you know, the guy's legit. Also, I paid the full $1,500 for this, and it only had $30 shipping listed on the eBay thing, which I asked John about. I was like, you know, that doesn't seem like enough to cover something this heavy. You know, just in case I need to pay extra, let me know. And he said, no, I'll take care of any costs above that $30 for the shipping, which again, it must have cost him a lot more than $30 to ship it. It got here very quickly. It was probably like a 2 or 3 day shipping from North Carolina to Central New York. And yeah, anyway, I was very happy with the shipping, and I wanted to just kind of mention that he did an amazing job. I'm going to keep that box because if I ever need to send one of these out for repair, I'm going to use that very same box and that same packing material because he just did such a good job. So anyway, that's the story so far. I'll let you know once it's installed in the car, and we'll give it a test run. Okay, so this is a little bit of an additional content. Since I had the Soliton here in the kitchen, I figured I would go over how I actually use it in the car, hooked up to a wireless router. So this little wireless router, just a cheap Linksys jobby from about 10 years ago, maybe more, and it doesn't have to be anything super fancy, just anything that can take a wired input and convert it into wireless is a win. So as you can see here, we have one of the 4 ports, which is just a regular Ethernet port where you plug in a laptop. In fact, we could plug the laptop into here as well, and we would be able to access things. But all I've done for configuring this unit is changed its IP address range. So rather than the default, which on this unit was 192.168.1. something, I changed it to 169.254.0. something. In this case, the something I set it to was 10. Doesn't really matter. It can be anything as long as it's not a 1, which is the address of this, or something in the DHCP range, which is usually 100 plus. So again, I chose 10. It could be 2, 3, 4, whatever you want. Anyways, that's all I did to configure that. And then I set up this with a password and a wireless ID. So the wireless ID I chose for this was Daytona Wireless. And then I just hooked my laptop to it. So we'll set this guy up here out of the way a little bit. And you'll see that on the computer we're connected to the Daytona Wireless Network, and we are getting live data from the controller. I can hit refresh, just like I could when it was wired in. And there we go, getting the live information. It's updating the time and stuff from the controller. So with this, you can reprogram the controller, do everything you could if you are hardwired into it, but no wires, which is kind of handy. Again, alternatively, you could hook it up with a wire to the router. I have the router inside my car, so I technically could do that, but it's just as convenient to have it be wireless. What this also allows me to do is crazy stuff like this. I have this Android app, also available on my blog, but it's not really in a very well documented state, and it's an APK file. It's not on like the Google Play Store or anything, so you'd have to download it and then just say, yes, I trust the source, which is me. But whatever. Anyway, I would like to kind of spruce this particular app up and make it look nicer, maybe add some pretty graphics and things, but for the moment, it gets the job done. And as you can see, we can also hit refresh here on the app, and it refreshes the information from the controller. It's getting the live data feed from it and all that good stuff. And so you can use this to log the information from trips and things to text files and then analyze them afterwards if you want. Also shows our error message or 0 voltage after pre-charge right there on the phone, which is very handy. Again, all based on it being a wireless connection. Lastly, I can hook up my tablet to it. So I have this tablet set up running the same application, the little Android app, and this I've actually used in my car in previous videos, that I can see what's going on with the controller. I can change the configuration at any time. Again, we can refresh it, get the information, and there we go. Time is updating, real-time data, logging, all that fun stuff. So you can do it from a laptop running Windows.net. You can do it from a tablet. So as you can see, all of these are getting the information from the controller at the same time. And if I refresh any of them, say from the phone, for example, if I hit refresh, you can see the other two go through their refresh cycle of updating the web page, and there we go. So I can program it from any one of these 3 devices at any time, just based on them being connected to that wireless network that's in my car. Now that wireless network is not connected to the internet or anything, so it's not, there's no security breach or anything like that, unless someone hacks my Wi-Fi network on my in my car, my little router. They're not going to be able to get at my controller and do anything nefarious. But what it allows me to do is, hit drag race mode when I'm in the car and just go. And it'll reprogram my car on the fly from a tablet or a phone or a, computer, whatever. So anyway, I just wanted to show you how that was set up. And it's pretty basic. So again, we'll just quickly go to the web page here for the router. So I've reconfigured this router to 169.254. Let me get that on frame. .0. Oops, let's hit a key. So http://169.254.0.10 is what I set the router to, and I type in my password. And I'm on the router. So all I did was on this section right here, which again I'm not sure if the camera's making it out, but it's local IP address. I changed it from the 192.168.1.1, which is the default for this router, to the 169.254.0.10. And what that ends up doing is it changes the DHCP range, that every device that you connect to it gets a DHCP address that is within that subnet. And that allows you to connect to that device. As long as none of them have that 169.254.0.1, then it should just work. So yeah, local network, I think I can view this here. DHCP clients table, and this shows that it's got my Android, my laptop, and my other Android device all connected. And those got DHCP addresses of 100, 101, and 102. Again, as long as they don't conflict with that .1, that is the controller, or the .10, which is the router itself, then it all just works. And it's like magic. So anyway, nothing super exciting. I just kind of wanted to go over that because I have had questions in the past of, hey, how do you make that work? And it's reasonably straightforward. And again, since we're connected, we can just go to the EVNetics page and see it on the website, reconfigure it manually without any of my funky apps. Just any old web browser. So it's pretty, I don't know, it's pretty handy and really easy to set up. So hope that helped someone. Have a great day.